Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm your host, FD for 650TV, and in this video, we want to look at why PEP DEXs are gaining traction now, at this moment in time. That's a new narrative kicking in, or it's been riding the waves for the past few weeks. But why is that? That's what we want to jump into. Before I jump into this video, guys, please know that this is not financial advice. Please do your own research. Do not take what we're going to share with you in this video as any advice of any sort. This content is also not targeting UK audiences for obvious reasons. Please do your own research, and if you're from the UK, you shouldn't be watching any crypto-related content. Check the FCA's website for more details on that. That said, let's come back to the reasons why PEP DEXs are gaining traction now. Well, there are several converging forces that are pushing perpetual trading on DEXs into the spotlight. First, you got erosion of trust in centralized exchanges. Past blowups, exchange hacks, mismanagement, regulatory crackdowns all have made users wary of custody risks. PEP DEXs offer self-custody, eliminating counterparty risk inherent in depositing funds into a SEX or centralized exchange. The next reason is around demand for transparency and algorithmic fairness. On-chain order books or matching engines grant visibility into trades, fees, liquidations, and full auditability. Some DEX designs aim to reduce or neutralize minor extractable value or MEV attacks or sandwiching, which centralized exchanges may obfuscate or cover up. A recent academic study measured how much value searchers extract in centralized exchange versus DEX arbitrage, showing that searchers captured over $233.8 million in arbitrage profit in 19 months using SEX to DEX flows. PEP DEXs try to minimize that by clever ordering, hidden orders, or specialized execution rules. The next reason is around technological maturity and performance improvements. Chains and DEXs can now approach performance levels that are less obviously inferior to SEXs or centralized exchanges. For example, Hyperliquid's Layer 1 is built for Perps. It claims approximately 20,000 transactions per second and sub-second finality for trade operations. Metrics show PEP DEX volumes are booming. In Q2 of 2025, PEP DEX volume hit approximately $898 billion, with Hyperliquid and Asta leading. In August 2025, DEX perpetual volume reached $514.4 billion, with Hyperliquid accounting for approximately 77.4% of that. While Hyperliquid is only charged here, it is setting the pace. Capital efficiency and yield collateral innovation is the next reason why PEP DEXs are gaining traction now. Some new PEP DEXs enable using yield-bearing assets or liquid staking tokens as collateral, so capital isn't idle while you trade. This improves return on investment for traders and LPs alike. Asta references this as a core differentiator. Let's move on to narrative and ecosystem support, where DeFi builders, protocols, and Layer 1 chains are increasingly backing PEP DEXs as a foundational infrastructure. As ecosystems align incentives towards on-chain finance, PEP DEXs become more than niche, they become pillars of DeFi evolution. You could say that's the next step of DeFi evolution. So how do PEP DEXs stack up versus centralized exchanges? Let's start by looking at custody and counterparty risk. First off, on traditional centralized exchanges, funds are held with the exchange, risk of mismanagement and hacks, whereas on PEP DEXs, users keep custody, smart contract risk is the main vector here. But if you're looking at liquidity and spread or depth, on centralized exchanges, there is very deep markets, market makers, and tight spreads. On PEP DEXs, it's improving, but still more fragmentation, slippage risk on large orders. Moving on to execution speed and latency. On centralized exchanges, it's millisecond matching, internal ledgers, no blockchain delays. Whereas on PEP DEXs, there's block confirmation, gas, network latencies, but newer chains are narrowing that gap. But if we look at the fee structure, predictable market maker and taker fees, margin or margin interest and so forth, that's for centralized exchanges. As for PEP DEXs, it's often lower or flexible fees, but subject to gas, slippage, and protocol parameters. Let's move on to transparency and auditability. For centralized exchanges, we call this the black box, internal order books, opaque, internal matching. Whereas on PEP DEXs, it's fully on-chain, auditable, with more trust in how trades are executed. As for product variety and innovation, on centralized exchanges, the product offering is wide. There is margin, there are futures, there are options, staking, fiat on and off ramps. Whereas for PEP PEP DEXs, we are only talking of rapid innovation. You got hidden orders, multi-collateral, cross-chain PEPs, and yield collateral. As for regulatory compliance, centralized exchanges, you got KYC, and they centralize that KYC process, ability to respond to regulation. Whereas on PEP DEXs, they are more resistant to censorship, but face regulatory risk indirectly. For example, derivative rules, jurisdiction, and so forth. For some platforms, you can't even access them from certain countries. And finally, if we look at onboarding and user experience, on centralized exchanges, it's smooth with fiat rails. User experience is mature, and there's customer support. Whereas on PEP DEXs, historically tougher. You got to set up a wallet, you got to deal with the gas issues. If you don't hold certain tokens, you can't pay for gas with token you're trading. The chain switching, but user experience is generally improving. So from a practical standpoint, centralized exchanges still dominate in absolute volume, especially in derivatives, but PEP DEXs are carving out meaningful share, especially in the niche of crypto-native trustless trading. Let's look at some performance and examples. You got Hyperliquid, Aster, Avo, and so forth. Let's start with Hyperliquid and the Hype token, and the metrics tend as follows. You got 30-day PEP volume is approximately 284.2 billion, open interest at approximately 2.7 billion, and dominance on many days. Hyperliquid leads all DEXs in perpetual volume, outrunning older players like DYDX and Synthetics. And I think in terms of volume, Hyperliquid, there was a time when it smashed volume on Ethereum. That's crazy, right? Next, you got design, and Hyperliquid is vertically integrated with this layer 1, the Hyperchain, optimized for PEPs, on-chain order book, custom ordering rules to reduce toxic flow. But there are some challenges though for Hyperliquid. The Hyper token is down a decent amount from its peak, reflecting volatility and market correction. As for Aster, it is frequently named in analysis of leading PEP DEX growth. Its futures, hidden orders, yield collateral, and multi-chain are seen as strategic. While it trails Hyperliquid currently in absolute metrics, its trajectory is rising rapidly under the PEP DEX theme. I know there are some still arguing that there is nothing much happening on Aster. There are no products built on top of it and so forth. But guys, give it time, it's coming. And you know, there is a focused co-founder in Zizi. I think he's one of the co-founders, even though I don't have the exact information in front of me. If we look at Avo, MYX, and Synthetic, and Sign Future, in rankings of best decentralized perpetual exchanges, Hyperliquid tops the charts, followed by Apex X, Drift, DYDX, GMX. Avo is part of that competitive set, but the other two, MYX and Sign Futures, they are probably catching up, but they are not up there yet. These protocols also push advanced features. You're talking of options, cross-margin, and so forth, but often lack the vertical integration or throughput specialization that Hyperliquid claims. As for centralized exchanges, you got giants like Binance, Bybit, OKX, and possibly Coinbase. They absolutely scale. Binance often handles 50 to 100 billion in perpetual trades on any given day. Hyperliquid, though impressive, is still trailing in raw size. Liquidity and execution, well, centralized exchanges currently retain an edge, tighter spreads, deeper order books, faster cancellation, internal order book routing, cross-asset margins. Whereas for PEP DEXs, you got to sign into your wallet and everything. By the time you do that, the trade is probably gone if you're talking of milliseconds. Regulation and custody risk. Centralized exchanges face more regulatory scrutiny and counterpart risk, which is a vulnerability PEP DEXs exploit in marketing. Thus, the comparison is centralized exchanges are big, deep, institutional, while PEP DEXs are nimble, transparent, and increasingly competitive at scale. Will PEP DEXs surpass SEXs, which are your centralized exchanges though? It's tempting to say yes, but the honest answer is maybe over a long time and likely in specific segments. You're talking of crypto native, derivatives, and leverage before global dominance. Arguments in favor of eventual overtaking or by PEP DEXs over centralized exchanges. You got growing DEX share in derivatives, where the DEX to SEX PEP volume ratio has climbed. In August of this year, 2025, is reached approximately 8.3%. Network effects and protocol lock-in as more trading, liquidity, and composability build on DEX platforms, switching costs rise. Trust and risk premium. If further exchange failures or regulatory clampdowns knock SEX confidence, decentralized PEPs will gain more appeal. And technological scaling, where if the infrastructure continues improving, you're talking of TPS, latency, and cross-chain, then performance gap narrows between the two. And finally, you got innovation and product differentiation. Hidden orders, yield collateral, multi-chain PEPs, privacy, and so forth give perpetual DEXs an edge in features. Because for centralized exchange, they probably want to keep those features for themselves, and they deliberately hide their orders, but they can view yours. So they're pretty much trading against you and trying to make you lose. What about the Arguments against or headwinds. Well, you got liquidity fragmentation and depth. Centralized exchanges still command unmatched depth for flagship assets. Very large trades may still slip or move markets on DEXs. And as for network and chain bottlenecks, on-chain execution costs, gas chain congestions, they still matter. DEXs are more vulnerable to these. As for regulatory pressure, well, Perps are derivatives, but regulators may push against decentralized derivatives protocol or force compliance hurdle. When it comes to user onboarding and user experience as a barrier, many users still prefer easy fiat rails, customer support, know your customer or KYC, and stable user interface. DEXs must match or exceed in convenience for people to actually move. You need to give people a reason to move. And when it comes to market inertia, many large capital allocators and institutions are comfortable with SEX or centralized exchange infrastructure, custody services, and institutional grade control. Thus, full replacement of centralized exchange is unlikely in the short term, but segment surpassing in Perps, in support for certain chains, in niche markets is quite possible. I think it will happen at some point, but not in the short term. My final thoughts on this subject, guys, is that Perp DEXs are the slick new challengers within the derivatives arena. They are transparent, sovereign, and innovation loaded. They may not dethrone Binance overnight, but they are gunning for the crown in their own league. Consider this. Centralized exchanges are the skyscrapers of finance, massive, deep, heavily fortified, whereas Perp DEXs are the agile, speedboats, nimble, visible, fighting for every trade wave. Over time, the waves may erode the shore, letting speedboats become battlefield ships. But until then, the skyline still belongs to the towers. But the race isn't over. The balance of power is shifted. Perpetual DEXs might not knock out centralized exchanges fully, but they are carving out a throne of their own, and sooner than many expected. Are you with me on this subject, guys? Let me know in the comment section. Until the next one, FD for 65.tv signing out for now. Bye.